Hi guys. Good morning. It's Karen Deshay, Justin's mama. It's Carolina blue skies in the Smokies, and another day without my child. And sadly, that is how I look at it. Well, I'm going to get to the crux of what we were talking about the other day. I checked, and there are 17 states out of 50 that if your child or loved one are murdered in the commission of a violent crime, a felony, you are not allowed to be present in the courtroom during the trials or hearings. You heard me right. 17 states out of 50, you will not be allowed to be present in the courtroom during the hearing or trials. Why? Because the defense attorneys, yes, the attorneys for the murderers, have decided that you, in your emotional state, might sway the decision of the judge or the jury to be against their poor defendant. Well, excuse me, when they were murdering your child or your loved one, did they have any sympathy for them? No, they did not. But there are 17 states. This is something that must be changed. Not should be changed, must be changed. I'm a very emotional person. I have no problem showing my emotion. I thought that's what emotion was for. I didn't know I had to hide behind some stoic societal shield and pretend I have no emotion. Sorry, not gonna happen. I've shown my emotion since I was a child. What is exactly part of what makes me Karen Deshay, Justin's mama. I don't go around blubbering. That's not what I mean. I used to laugh all the time. That's emotion. I used to smile all the time. That's emotion. I used to be happy all the time. That's emotion. I used to be joyful all the time. That's emotion. Then a man with a criminal background, longer than my arm, murdered my son. Now I grieve all the time. Now I'm bereaved all the time. Now I'm depressed all the time. Now I'm sad all the time. Now I cry all the time. Guess what? That wasn't by choice. The murderer took my son out of my life. He took my joy. He took my constant. He took everything that was good in my life, and he murdered it. Everything that was wonderful in my life, and he murdered it. He had no right. He should have turned and walked away. And when you hear a judge say, I've been on the bench for 30 years, and it is my opinion you cannot be rehabilitated, you're pretty clear on the type of person who murdered your beautiful child. Someone with no remorse, someone with no conception of remorse, someone who has no concept of life and what it means. Someone who felt they were entitled, and someone who belongs exactly where they are, in prison. So 17 states out of 50 U.S. states will not allow survivors to be in the courtroom. That's pathetic. There are just too many errors in our judicial system. There is too much leaning toward the criminal's protection and no protection for the victims or survivors. There's no interest in the collateral damage left behind in the wake of the murder of the loved one or the child. And there is a lot of collateral damage. My child died intestate. Well, of course he did. Who thinks about getting a will for a 22-year-old college student? Absolutely no one. First, I had to go to the courthouse and apply to become the administrator of my son's estate. As he was a college student, there was no estate. He had a couple of credit cards with very low balances because he did not believe in just cranking up credit cards. Yes, he had some student loans. His vehicle was paid for. He had his rent. He had utilities, silly things that weren't considered revolving credit or credit cards or debt. What a lot of people don't understand in these sad situations, and I didn't know it either, is if you'll flip over the page of a credit card or a student loan, there is insurance on these. And if the recipient dies, there is insurance that pays the debt in full. So my son's student loans, all I had to do was I made a phone call and they instructed me what to send, which amounted to a copy of my administrative paperwork showing I was the administrator of my son's affairs, a copy of his death certificate. It took me 2.5 years to be able to say death certificate. I called it his certificate for 2.5 years. And I usually included a short letter, which I kept a copy of. I would include the account number, his name, his social, which at that time had already been closed out, because once you get the administrative papers, that number is immediately shut down. When you're getting, I had to close out my son's bank accounts. Not only do you have to get administrative papers and a death certificate, there is an additional piece of paper that one must get. And right now the name of that paper eludes me, but I did get in a knockdown drag out with Capital One over $59 because I had to jump through all kinds of hoops to get this lousy piece of paper. And I mean, there were a ton of hoops I had to jump through to get $59 out of my son's Capital One account. And the only reason he had Capital One was because those were the only ATMs on his university's campus. And he was with Wachovia. And every time he used his Wachovia ATM card, it charged him $2. And he was going bankrupt, just jokingly, I'm using that word. We would tease about it. I was like, Justin, good Lord, for every $2 you're having to use, it's insane. I mean, he kept his Wachovia account, but did open an account with Capital One just so he could take out money on campus if he needed to. And the $2 charges stopped. But I had never in my life, I went to Wachovia, presented the administrative papers, presented my son's will, and they got his money. And when you're going through this, the last thing you need is combative people. And it seemed everywhere I turned and put my son's death certificate in their faces, 50% of the people wanted to be combative and just make my life even more of a living hell. I don't know if, and most of these people were under the age of 30. I don't know when people lost the concept of compassion and when they gained the concept of entitlement and rudeness. But I'm sorry, not everybody's like this, but a large percentage of young people have absolutely no adeptness at dealing with their fellow human being. There is a great lacking of people skills in America. There is an abruptness, an entitlement I feel from these young people. And I'm sorry, I have never treated anyone in the manner in which I was treated on many levels. I did have to call the main office pursuant to the treatment I received at the Capital One Bank there in College Park. It was so far beyond, and I will refer to this several times, a Twilight Zone experience. And at my age, I've dealt with thousands of people in the sales arena. And there is a vortex of insanity and Twilight Zone in College Park. I lived in Maryland for 17 years, so don't tell me that's the way things happen in Maryland. This was usually young people between the ages of 24 and 30, and they definitely have a problem with people skills. They're rude, care nothing for life, and when you challenge them, they can't handle it. So if you're going to dish it out, young folks, you best be able to handle it, because I'm going to hand it back to you on a silver platter. So don't challenge this gal unless you plan on going the full length. I'm not some old lady. I have years of experience of dealing with thousands of personalities. And this was insane. It really was. Um, but getting back to dealing with getting the paperwork done, the hardest thing I had to do was go to the courthouse and file to become my son's advocate, and my son's advocate's the incorrect word. Look, I've lost my wording again. Become his legal estate planner. And again, I remember I sat there crying the whole time. The young lady who handled it was great because I guess they're dealing with bereaved people, and she was wonderful. I remember her sharing that she had lost her dear father recently, so it was even harder on her, and she was very young, and she was a really great young lady, very professional. So you have to make a trip to the courthouse, and you have to make the calls to anyone they owe bills to, and you have to send your paperwork and a short, brief letter just with the account number and your child's name, your address, and get that taken care of. Any people, I did get calls 2 years later from Justin's cell phone company about a $96 bill. I jokingly, I'm sorry, I laughed. I said, you got the paperwork, my administrative papers, and Justin's death certificate, along with a letter. It's right here. Don't call me again. And that's all I had to say, because if they missed the paperwork, that was not my problem. I got another call from a credit card where Justin had $300 on it, and again, I pulled the file. I said the letter was sent to this address with this account number, the administrative paperwork, his death certificate, and I even received a letter back from them. So, you're telling me on the day my son was murdered that he owed you $1,500? No, he did not. He owed you $300, and you've jacked all this interest, penalty, and whatnot on it, and you're a collection agency adding your fee, and now all of a sudden you're saying, if I'll pay you $1,300, you'll let it go. Well, guess what? According to the courthouse in the state of Maryland, the only person who had to be paid because my son died intestate, if in fact there were any monies, which there weren't, was the funeral home and the cemetery. So have a nice day, and do not contact me again. And these are all the things that you just have to say to these people. They cannot hound you. They cannot badger you. And truly, look on the back of every page. There's insurance. And if, sadly, the person passes, there's built-in insurance, and they're paid. I ran across an article a while back, and this mother was being hounded by Sally Mae. Well, guess what? Sally Mae knows fully well that there's insurance. And my son, Sally Mae, was paid. So that's ridiculous. And I did write the lady a letter, a brief letter, and just say, have you sent them your administrative papers and your child's death certificate? And her response to me was yes. And I told her to just send a letter that you'll notify your attorney and they are no longer to contact you. And, and to remind them that she had sent the administrative papers and her child's death certificate, and maybe put in another copy and just say the attorney to contact her attorney. But things tend to get lost in the cracks, but they cannot badger you. So again, young people who are still in high school, still in college, yes, they may have a credit card, they may have a debit card, they may have a cell phone, they may be even in high school working and have their own cell phone and whatnot. But if they're going to die intestate, guess what? They cannot be badgered. Oh, I did tell the creditor about the $1,300. I told him I could give him my son's address at the cemetery and give him his plot number, and he could just contact him. And if my son did by chance write back, could he please recontact him and telling his mama misses him, and could he please write her a letter? And that was that. They no longer contacted me. You have to be firm. You have enough going on. You have enough happening in your life. And to be badgered over a 2-year-old bill when you took care of it properly, it took 2 years for them to even contact me once because I took care of it properly. So, another sad situation that it's never ending. But again, these are things that you don't want to take care of, but you have to. And I remember the hardest things. The hardest things were going to the funeral home, picking out things. That day, I didn't want to be there. That was the last place I wanted to be on this planet. But I had to. The last thing I wanted to do was be composing my son's obituary. But I had to. The last place I wanted to be was at my son's memorial. Well, 2 memorials. But I had to. It still seems like a surreal nightmare. And each day that passes, it becomes more real because I start to realize Justin really is gone and he's not coming home. But that takes time. I never went more than 48 hours without talking to my son, and 48 hours was a long time because in between he would send me texts and emails. It's been 3 years and almost 6 months. In 6 more days, 6 months. 3 years, 6 months. We never lose count. I could be in a dark dungeon and still tell you when the 11th of the month is coming. I always know. I'm not real thrilled that I always know, but I know. All the parents of murdered children, we all have our stories. I only know how I feel. I don't know how other parents feel. I only can tell you how I feel. I'm never going to assume that I know how other parents feel about their child. But I sure know how I feel. And I wish this upon no one. It's like Being the walking dead. Your heart beats and you breathe. But that's where it ends. You know, life is never going to be the same. You know that. And everybody keeps looking at you like, what's your problem and why can't you just get on? Oh, if it were just that simple. But it's not. You try to focus on something else, and inevitably, your mind wanders back to your child and you think about all the things they could be accomplishing, all the people's lives they could be positively impacting. Your grandchildren, would they look like him? You could be laughing instead of crying. You could be loving instead of feeling like you're dying inside all the time. But it's okay. You'll see them again. And that's what keeps you putting one foot in front of the other, trying to get through the day so that you know you're one day closer to seeing your child, one day closer to seeing their smile, to touching their hand, one day closer. God bless, guys. It's going to be a long day. I can tell you that right now. This is Justin's mama. I'll try and catch up with y'all tomorrow. God bless, and good luck, and stay safe.